Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Liam McCollum Show, a podcast by Human Reaction. And today I'm interviewing Dave Smith again. This is the second time that I've had him on my show. I interviewed him right before the Turning Point USA debate with Josh Hammer, which was hosted by Charlie Kirk this summer, that caused so much controversy with Dave Smith being invited to debate there, and Tucker Carlson also giving a speech in which he said that Epstein was likely affiliated with Israel and that the current government was covering it up, which has just caused so much controversy on the right. And then obviously with Charlie Kirk's assassination and this question of, the direction of the right and where Charlie Kirk's mind was at on Israel, this has kind of been a flashpoint on the right and a huge conversation that has led to Ben Shapiro basically declaring war on Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, saying that they are sabotaging America and that Nick Fuentes is also sabotaging America. And he says that there's this anti-Semitic wing of the right that needs to be basically purged in Buckleyite fashion. And so I wanted to invite Dave on to discuss this, to kind of reflect on his role and the developments since that debate with Turning Point and the last time I had him on the show. And then also just to ask him where he thinks we go from here. I asked him about Thomas Massie at the end, so hang tight for that. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this episode. And also follow my friends at Human Reaction. David Rand, Joe Sheehan, and Kyle Mack are putting out episodes weekly, commenting on culture, news, politics, everything. And make sure to join their Discord. I'll have the link of that in the description below, too, where you can ask us questions. Before my interview with Dave, I submitted to the Discord a question about what they wanted me to ask him and what they wanted me to talk about. So join that Discord and join the conversation. And I really hope you enjoy this episode with Dave.
Liam McCollum, really one of the brightest young minds in the liberty movement, one of our rising stars.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for joining me on the show again. I can't thank you enough for doing it. And you've done a lot of huge interviews over the last month, obviously having Nick Fuentes on and then Tucker Carlson. And then you just released your interview with Candace Owens today as we're recording. And I just kind of want to get your reaction to it. I mean, from my vantage point, as someone who has kind of been like an early adopter of these libertarian views, to see you over the last few years has kind of been surreal, where, it kind of seems like you're at the center of all of this from my perspective, where, 5 years ago, it was us, Michael Heiss, Scott Horton, talking about running you for president, because it was like, oh, we could really take advantage of this decentralized moment we're in, this media moment we're in. And you're really the only one talking about these ideas. And then suddenly the Ukraine war starts happening. And I'm in college at the time, and I'm like tabling, doing these like speaking events, trying to talk to students my age to see where the temperature is. And it wasn't really clear where the right would end up on it. And yet you were going on Rogan's show and making the case against the war. And then you had Tucker Carlson do this first GOP primary event where he just like planted a flag and said, no, like you have to be opposed to this war if you're going to win. And then, there was a lot of suspicion, especially for me, where I was like, okay, are we just pivoting away from Ukraine because we want to go to war with Iran or go to war with China or in favor of Taiwan? And then October 7th happened, and I was like, okay, let's see where the right's going to be on this. And you go on Tucker Carlson's show, you go on Rogan's show, and now, I mean, here we are, and there's little daylight between us and Tucker. And it's just this point where, last time I had you on the show, it was like the week before you were going to do this TPUSA debate with Josh Hammer and the late Charlie Kirk.
Oh, is that right?
Surreal.
Is that right? That was the last time I was on. Yeah,
exactly. And it's super surreal looking back at it, because it's like, now, I mean, that event has been at the center of all of this debate about like the future of the right. And, like Charlie's donors were pulling out of TPUSA because he hosted you and Tucker Carlson there. So I'm just curious to get your reaction and like what you make of all of this and how it feels to kind of be at the center of it. And if you agree, I mean, from my vantage point, it really does seem like us libertarians, like it's finally getting to the point where especially young conservatives are adopting our ideas that we've had for the longest time. And also like Candace Owens is saying that you're like responsible for her political evolution. And I just can't help but feel like you're kind of pushing the needle on this.
No. Well, thanks. Well, first off, it's great to talk to you. I always really enjoy talking to you on air and off air. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot there that you just said. And I guess it is something when you think about like where we were 5 years ago. To me, it's like where we were 10 years ago, where we were 15 years ago. I guess to your point, like back then, during the height of the COVID insanity, I mean, I think the thing that I was kind of trying to rally libertarians around was the idea that like, look, number one, there's this new like media landscape. And number two, there's this new like crazy tyrannical threat. And we can really lead the charge in being against this stuff. And that was always kind of what I thought. That I think I was pretty clear about this the whole time. That was the entire purpose of the Libertarian Party experiment. Like it was always to be like, hey, let's use this to get our ideas out there. And I was always saying that it's like, look, I'm going to do this whether with the party or without the party. Like, it's just like, why don't we all get on board with this? And to be honest, I mean, it's kind of crazy in hindsight what a fight that was when that's what I was offering this party that's had like, you know, no real success to speak of until our people got in there and you could argue the successes that Angela got out of this administration. And, you know, as far as what you're saying about like me being close to the center of a lot of the, you know, the kind of important conversations. Yeah, I'm in a interesting position. I mean, I'm not exactly like the top guy or even exactly in the top class, but I have like my show has grown. And I happen to kind of be in this unique situation where like a lot of the top guys really sure do like me a lot and have me on a lot. And I have, you know, some degree of influence on them. And so to the extent that I have that, it's always been to try to push in the direction of what I think is right, which is like the Ron Paul stuff and the Murray Rothbard stuff and all the insights that they have that I still think to this day apply more than ever. And so it was interesting even to me to hear Candace say that today, where she was like, no, that was when you came in. That's really what sent me on this whole thing. And you're like, you know, part of me is like, awesome. And then part of me is like, what have I done? You know, like if I change the world in some bad way, you know, but, you know, I think in a lot of ways, it's that Victor Hugo quote that Ron Paul always loved to say that like, there's an idea whose time has come. And I have played somewhat of a role in that, but I don't know, you know, absent me, I'm not sure this whole thing looks any different than it does right now. I mean, what happened was that, you know, Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and all these people, they were confronted by something that they just weren't going to compromise on. And, you know, the truth is that the American people are tired of wars and they're tired of this stuff that, you know, and they're tired of you know, trying to manage the Middle East while our country falls apart. And so, you know, it was just like, it's like anything else, dude. Like, it's just a lot of different things worked out. I'm very lucky to just kind of have been in the situation I was in to perfectly fall into this. And I did some good things along the way to, you know, put myself in a good situation. But all of these weird things have come together. And I will say it's very surreal feeling for me personally, you know, that I'm so close to so many of these big moments.
Yeah, 100%. I was playing the Ron Paul Giuliani moment to one of my friends, Kyle Schick, who's just a great friend of mine. We've been friends since like fourth grade. And he's kind of like waking up to all this stuff. And he's been like a huge fan of yours and Daryl Cooper's in particular. And he was like, man, like he was just like baffled that like the ideas Ron Paul was talking about in 2008 and 2012 are like the same ideas being debated now. It's just that like they're finally to the front of the conversation. Like we dropped all pretenses. But like back in the day, like Ron Paul was saying we shouldn't bomb Iran and they weren't going to have a nuclear program and all this stuff. And he was just like amazed that it's like that's been the political conversation of my lifetime, or at least the motivation of these guys my entire life. And the way he put it, especially after you shouted me out to Tucker Carlson, which I'm so thankful for, was like, from his perspective, he was like, it's kind of like you were like an early adopter of these ideas. Like you found these like very obscure people like Tom Woods, Scott Horton, Dave Smith, but like they were so self-evidently true. And then October 7th happened, the Ukraine war happened, and it was just like, oh, like it was just obvious that you guys would fill the void. And now it's to the point where like I said, Tucker Carlson, there's like little daylight between us at all on these issues. And that's become clear, obviously, this week with Ben Shapiro basically declaring war on him and taking on this Buckleyite, persona of trying to push out the dissident right wingers. And then you have Tucker Carlson, who is really like the anti-Buckley person and figurehead of our time.
Well, okay, so I guess there's something so interesting about this to me, man. And I know I'm sorry for referring to you as a child when I gave you that shout out, but I recognize that you are an adult human being, but but there is, even as you describe this, I just see this like almost like generational difference. And so to me, right, what's so interesting about this is I remember back in the Ron Paul days, right? And so when you're playing your buddy that the Ron Paul Giuliani moment, which is amazing, and that's so cool that you're showing people that, but make sure you go play him the Jon Stewart piece that he did on Ron Paul.
I did right after. I did.
Did you? Yeah. Okay, see, that's the like such an interesting one, because Jon Stewart in one of his greatest bits ever, and it was so like, I don't know if I could make you understand how huge that was when that happened. And we were all like, what? Jon Stewart is doing a thing, blasting the entire mainstream media at the time for just ignoring Ron Paul. And it was like, for people who don't know it, it was like the punchline was like that MSNBC would be like, Mitt Romney moves into first place, knocking Michelle Bachmann down to third.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, who's number 2? Or like whatever. It would be like, they would just leave him out. And the point is that I was saying
13th floor of a hotel.
Yes, yeah, it was so great. But so anyway, so the thing is that, right? And like, I know to young people, like I seem old, but I swear I'm not that old. And it's going to happen to you. Liam, I know you think it's not going to, but you're going to be me so soon. You have no idea, dude. You're going to get old just like I did. And so, but it just not that long ago, the whole thing was what you were just describing, that they just wouldn't cover you, or that they just wouldn't, or that you'd get kicked out of National Review and you'd get blacklisted. And Pat Buchanan, as Mark Levin just said last week, right? We canceled Pat Buchanan. We canceled the John Birch Society, right? Like, but that really did happen. So the thing was that forever, they could pretend it was a marketplace of ideas, but it was a marketplace of ideas where all of us never got or all of our forefathers never got a chance to be in that marketplace. That was the whole game. It was the whole game up until yesterday. And that's the perspective that I have just from being a little bit older. Is like, you guys don't realize how new this stuff is. Like, even when you're going back to the Ukraine war or going back to COVID or going back, this is 5 years ago. This is 3 years ago. This is not like this 10 years ago. The situation we have right now didn't exist. It took this whole thing developing where, the entire like Hollywood, cable, network TV, people aren't watching that in the numbers they used to be. And now they're watching all types of shows like this, but there's a million of them. And so now we just for the first time had a fighting shot for our ideas to actually compete in the marketplace. And to me, I guess I always had the confidence that if we did have that, we would really do well. And so it's not only our ideas, there's others that are winning too, but like, I don't know, the Buchananite ideas, Ron Paulian ideas, they're definitely dominating right now in the right wing, like especially amongst the young people. And it's because they've had a shot for the first time. They probably, like, honestly, they probably would have won back then if they had had a fair hearing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you're totally right. I mean, it is really strange, like with Twitter in particular. Like, I'm just I'll admit it, like I am just some kid and I'm on X and I have people like Meghan McCain quote tweeting my posts of you and Tucker saying that Buckley was the villain of the 20th century. So, I mean, it is a great equalizer where like I can piss off someone like that and it just completely changes the game. And I guess that is kind of like a segue into the current debate on the right. I think it is this phenomenon in particular, the kind of legacy media temptation to try to silence people in my generation that led to Nick Fuentes. And we talked about this a little bit on the last episode where you were talking about Jordan Peterson and the fact that Jordan Peterson's whole thing was like reaching out to disaffected young men and like actually like trying to reach them. And, you know, I'm more than grateful for that guy because he really did change my life and he changed so many young people's lives. Like Michael Heiss and I talk about this all the time. Like it really was kind of like a political revolution in some ways because like the context was that you had so many left wingers telling young men that like their very nature was toxic. And you had Jordan Peterson saying no. But then he turned around and as you pointed out in our last podcast together, he went on Rogan's show and he basically tried to attack you and Daryl Cooper by hitting them with Nick Fuentes and saying like, Joe Rogan, like what guidelines do you have when you invite guests on the show? Like, what about these groypers, even though he had never invited Nick on before? And what we were talking about was like, you know, like it was incumbent upon him to invite Nick on the show and actually talk to him. And if he actually believed that Nick's ideas were bad, what he would do is try to defeat them. And, you know, something that I've been thinking about is he used to get asked all the time whether he believed in God. And a lot of like people rightfully, I think, like were criticizing him because it felt like he kept meeting like this spiritual wall. Like he just couldn't do it for some reason. Yeah. But then he did say this really profound thing one time where he was like, you know, it's hard for me to say that I actually believe in God because what does belief mean? He's like, you know, belief is kind of like indicative in your actions. And he's like, if I believe in God, like my actions would, you know, like I would act in a certain way that indicates that I do believe in God. And I was thinking about that and I'm like, dude, like if you believe that Nick Fuentes and like his ideas were so parasitic and you were also someone who believed that these right-wing men needed to be reached, like if you actually believed that, you would talk to him. And I think like the role that you and Tucker have filled is kind of like actually like practicing what you preach. And you've reached out to these, this kid, Nick Fuentes. And again, here I am saying kid, but he's 2 years older than me. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it's not just Nick either. Like if you do believe that like the worst temptations on the right could come out in the next few years, like you want to talk to those guys. You want to talk to his audience. And I can like attest to just how prevalent he is right now among the young generations. Like every young person my age or younger knows who Nick is. They see him on Instagram, they see him on Twitter, and he's everywhere right now. So it is like very important that I think people try to reach out to them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously, right? Like, and you can't deny it. He's huge. He's one of like the biggest. He might be the biggest. I don't even know. He's up there just in general. He might be 5
million followers on Rumble.
Dude, and the fact that he's done it without with being like one of the most canceled, censored people and without like, you know, I mean, you could say he started doing all these shows now, but he started doing all these shows after he got huge, you know, like he really, I guess maybe he did stuff with some other guys who are big, Andrew Tate or something like that. But like he really built his thing in the dark on his own. And yeah, I mean, how would you, just accepting all of the other stuff that Jordan Peterson always stood for, how would you not just conclude that, like, well, the job here is to have a conversation with him? Look, I don't know. I don't want to say anything negative about Jordan Peterson. I look at him and I weirdly, like, I've gotten to sit down and do shows with so many of the people who I love and admire, and things that were like, this would have been a dream to do Ron Paul's show and to do Tom Woods' show and then to do Joe Rogan's show and to do all these, Tucker and all these people. Jordan Peterson weirdly to me feels like the show I should have done that's never going to happen. It's like the one that got away. It was like, I really wish I had sat down with that guy at one point, because he's the one I feel like I could have like gotten through to. I could have been like, no, but totally. you know this already, right? Because I could just use his own logic to be like, you have to be the one to have these conversations. And in a weird way, isn't it? Don't you remember, dude? Because this is your coming of age time. You remember how all the guys in the like intellectual dark web, like all the Brett Weinsteins and Jordan Peterson. Brett Weinstein, by the way, I think has done great through all of the major tests of the last few years. But
and he's getting better too.
Yeah. But Sam Harris and like all those guys, and it would always be about kind of how we're going to have these conversations. They're going to be controversial. And, they would talk about how we're against identity politics on the left. And almost all of them to a man. I remember Jordan Peterson saying this. I remember Konstantin Kassin saying this. All of them would say, hey, look, one of the worst, or maybe even the worst parts of woke leftism is that you could trigger the response of some crazy shit on the right. And I certainly made that prediction too. I'm sure you did. I'm sure, it was a very easy prediction to make. I made it on Rogan's podcast. I said once, it was like a viral video where I said, every time I see a tranny giving a lap dance to an 8-year-old, my first thought is, that's what the fuck, we got to start killing these people. And then my second thought is, I mean, not literally, that's a joke. And then my second thought is, we're going to live under a right-wing dictator in a few years, And so, but everybody kind of saw this coming. And then when it starts coming, it's almost like they all react like it's something they couldn't have possibly foreseen. And where is this coming? So it's always just been strange to me that they didn't have the reaction of like, okay, yep, this is exactly what we thought was going to happen. Let's talk about all of this. Instead, it's like, they have the same attitude the woke left had with those guys and just want to cancel and ruin all of them. How's that going to help anything?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I was saying years ago that like there's almost this thing where like if the left continues to call you racist or anti-Semitic or whatever, that eventually young right wingers, especially like online right wingers, were just going to accept it and say, fine, yeah, that's what I am.
Yeah.
And, it was like the OK symbol or whatever, when the left said that it represented white power or whatever. Like, obviously the thing that young right wing men were going to do is just tout the white power symbol around and try to mock these guys. And then you had Jordan Peterson, unfortunately, like with the Christ is King thing, he was like saying, like Christ is King is becoming an anti-Semitic moniker. And it's like, I kind of then resented that because I was like, well, obviously that's what it's going to be used as from now on. And as a Christian, like, I think that like, that's just a terrible thing.
Yes, I agree. And look, I completely agree with that. I respect that opinion as a Christian. I mean, what a crazy thing to tell a Christian that's an offensive statement. It's like going, I just like nothing against you, but I don't think the crucifix is fucked up. Like, you shouldn't ever do that. You're like, well, that's a big part of our whole thing. So I get that completely. But one of the things that, to me, the way I look at it, and I guess this is the way I analyze politics. Like, this is kind of almost like the key to the secret of what has made me whatever level of success I have, is that I just judge you by how you handle a storm. Liam, like you know my stuff well enough to know I've talked about this a lot. It's like, how do you handle a storm? When a storm's going on, when it's the craziest, that's what matters. Like, who's good when it really matters. And with that one, it felt like Jordan Peterson just caved to the storm. The Brett Kavanaugh one was a big thing. I think that damaged his credit. It's like, wait, what? You just said he should resign, and your rationale was like, because everything's so crazy, it'll calm down. And at the time, it was like, well, then you resign. What are you talking about, dude? Like, this is so there, and the thing I always try to caution people to this. It's like there will be moments. They seem to be happening more and more frequently, but there are moments where just crazy things are going on. Everyone's freaking out because there's the new thing. And in those moments, that's when it's most important to just be calm and try to learn something from what's going on. And with that same, not that it's exactly a storm, but the rise of Nick Fuentes, I guess the storm would be him going on Tucker Carlson's podcast and the whole reaction to that. But in this moment, I try to stay humble enough to go, what can I learn from this? What is going on? Man, look, I had Nick Fuentes on my show years ago, and maybe it's kind of hard to believe that I rose up the way I have over the last 5 years, but it's really hard to believe that he rose up so much further with taking the most, the views that any conventional thinking would have told you would prevent him from ever succeeding. And just that alone is really interesting. Think about that for a moment. What's going on here? And it seems like there's a strange, when everyone gets into these moments of hysteria, there's a very bizarre lack of interest. Aren't you interested in what's actually happening here before you just want to label it and just squash it or your threat? Okay, look, I get that impulse, especially with Nick Fuentes. But I guess even to me, one of the things that I've kind of been thinking about for a while, or for the last couple of weeks while this has all been going down, is hasn't it kind of revealed in a way something? When the Overton window gets stretched to accept Nick Fuentes, which, like it or not, has happened. That's not an opinion any of us get. No one gave that to Nick. He stretched it himself and included himself in it, which is crazy to our entire understanding of what the Overton window is. You're telling me the Overton window now includes someone who says Hitler is awesome? That's a pretty crazy development. Now I know everyone could be scared, but let's think about that for a second. And then as I'm thinking about that, I watched this what I've been calling Genocide Fest 2025. Where all the worst people in the world, Mark Levin and Randy Fine and all these people are speaking, and Brandon Tatum and all these guys. And, as I'm watching Mark Levin, it kind of dawns on me that he is Nick Fuentes. There is no difference. It's just what I'm saying is that actually Nick Fuentes is probably better. But what I'm saying is that when you hear Mark Levin, he's doing his thing. He's not making an argument, Liam. He's not going, look, now you think that central banking causes this, but actually I think a planned economy, he's not making the argument for why the war actually was a good idea instead of a bad. He's going he's like, listen, you little puny Nazi punk. You think you scare me? You're going to have to come through me. We're going to squash you like a bug. I'm just saying he's doing a shock jock talking shit thing. And in a weird way, you go, what's the difference between the two of you?
Right.
Other than, and I shouldn't even say that, because the difference, I guess, is that Nick is still saying, hey, I don't want violence against anyone, whereas you're advocating violence and you're getting the violence that you want. It does, I got to say, even to myself, I go, why the hell is it that Mark Levin should be inside the Overton window and Nick Fuentes shouldn't? Because I'll tell you, Liam, I got no good answer to that question.
Right. Yeah, and you're totally right about, I think, just forcing the Overton window open. I saw, in reaction to your comment with Tucker Carlson, you had said, you were essentially saying like Ben is saying that no Americans agree with Nick Fuentes, but there's this funny thing where we can like look at the view count and how many likes he's getting and all this stuff. And I saw a lot of people reacting to you and saying, oh, well, Dave thinks that view count is indicative of having a right opinion or something like that. But that's not the argument. The argument is that like this has happened. You can say that it's wrong, but aren't you interested in how this happened? Aren't you interested in how every single young right winger I know went from supporting Trump in 2024 to watching Nick Fuentes and loving his stuff all the time? Like that's a phenomenon that should be explored. But these guys want to say he's wrong.
Well, that's right. So it's like, but I think it's, I don't know what, I have to make some type of Smith law about this. I've been trying to for a while, but like it's, that 99.9% of the time that people invoke logical fallacies, they don't understand the logical fallacy that they're invoking. I mean, it's unbelievable. But people will go, they'll go like, right. So Ben Shapiro goes, he goes, his ideas are so much more unpopular than mine. And then I go, you've had all the fucking money in the world behind you and been on every platform. He's been canceled from everything, and he gets more views than you. Seems like more people are with him than you. And then they go, that's an appeal to, you know, whatever. That's an appeal to popularity or something. And you're like, no, the argument was about popularity. That's evidence. You started with the claim that this is look, but look, specifically in the case of Nick Fuentes, I think it's undeniably correct to say that no matter how incredible it is that he's stretched the Overton window the way he has, yes, marrying your views to Nazism or something like that is probably going to still be a deal breaker in like a national election or something like that. So like there is a point to that, but at the same time, there is also a point to say that like this is how over your shit the young generation is, particularly the young right wing. And I do think that there's a weird balance here that's very hard to kind of thread. You know, obviously, as you know, dude, like you were talking about how influential Nick Fuentes is amongst guys, especially right wing guys your age, you know, the most influential guy. And I'm sure there's some of them who really do believe in some hardcore shit that is like you really believe Adolf Hitler was the good guy and that the Nazi model is correct, or that the Holocaust never happened, or that it should have happened and should happen again, or whatever. Like there are some people like that, but there's also a huge portion of them who essentially the spirit of the whole thing is like, we're so pissed off with you that whatever you say, the button we're not allowed to press is the one where we are going to smash the absolute hardest. Like, fuck you. And that part I really do get. I get that. I get how there's just, you know, a group of people, a generation of people who have been handed nothing and then also been spat on while they've been handed nothing. You know, I get them being like, I'm going to be the thing that pisses you off the most. And I saw, I can't remember who tweeted it today, but someone had said a video. It was like one more video of someone, I guess at the Mamdani rally. They were saying the old woke line about how white people don't have culture. Like, and they were like, oh, what's white culture? You know, being racist. Europeans and whites have no culture. And you're like, yeah, dude, how long can you do that before you think you're going to get people who just go, no, you know, fuck you. I'm the opposite of what you want. And so I always saw it as an obvious reactionary movement that was predictable and understandable. And I think you could say this, Liam, but isn't it consistent with everything we always say about reactionary movements? You know, like, isn't it consistent with blowback and all this? It's just one more example of that same phenomenon.
Yeah, totally. Well, I want to get into what has happened this week with Ben Shapiro releasing that attack piece on Tucker Carlson and basically everyone who isn't him. I mean, I did notice that he didn't name you again.
I appreciated that.
Yeah. So, but I do want to admit, it was cruel of me to send you that Ben Shapiro video earlier this week, but
Yes, it was.
I do not apologize, and
It was friendship. It was friendship testing, but we got through it.
It was, and I am going to make you endure him again. He just went on with Megyn Kelly this week, reacting to all of this stuff, and I want to get your reaction to it, and we'll see if this works. I've tried sharing my screen on StreamYard, and it doesn't always work, so bear with me.
And the text exchange was very nice. I mean, here's what the actual text exchange went like after the call. So I texted him and I said, "Thanks so much for calling. It means the world. It truly does. Should we do a show together talking about the DSA threat, Democratic Socialists of America threat, and orienting in the same direction? Happy to do whatever it takes to bring everyone back together for the fight that matters." And Tucker then wrote back, "Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm going to spend the next week or two thinking about how to be most effective. The country is clearly on the brink." I reached out repeatedly after that. Nothing happened. And again, I thought it was a good idea at the time. I think I felt differently after I saw what he did with Nick Fuentes, and after he proceeded, in my opinion, to spend the subsequent weeks doing literally nothing to fight the left. I say this with sadness because Tucker used to be, I think, a deeply important part of the conservative push to win. The number of times that Tucker Carlson has mentioned Zoran Mamdani since October 5th on his show is once. And it was in the context of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson talking about the appeal of Zoran Mamdani. Just by way of contrast, not because I'm a perfect representative here, but because you talk about Zoran Mamdani a lot. A lot of us have. Since October 5th, I did 17 separate shows on Zoran Mamdani, including 4 in the last week before the election. Okay, because when you're orienting against the left, you really should orient against the left.
Okay, so a lot in there. I think, just to be clear, so the breakdown from the detente after Charlie was him interviewing Fuentes. Was that the next thing that happened that led to the blow up?
I mean, yes. I mean, I had not spoken a word. There
so
were
wasn't
things
that he attacked you, or you had something?
No, I don't care about people attacking
interview.
me, and I don't think Tucker cares about people attacking him. I mean, again, we're professionals. We're in a business where people comment on what we say publicly. Again, this is why. I think you and I differ on our angle with regard to, for example, Candace Owens. I think that what Candace Owens is doing right now is evil. It is evil what she is doing right now. Okay, and I say that again.
But what? Because I didn't opine on whether it's evil or not. But my position is it's really none of my business. And
why is it? But I have a question. Why is it none of your business? I mean, you comment on these things for a living.
I'm not mother of the internet.
No, but if this were on the left and somebody were accusing Charlie Kirk of his wife having murdered him, I assume that you would be talking about it.
Is that what Candace is accusing Erica of?
Yes.
Of murdering her own husband?
She's accusing TPUSA insiders and other members of the right wing, including Seth Dillon, of being involved in the murder of Charlie Kirk. Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Wait. We gotta pause this, Liam.
I don't have time to watch.
No, I believe you. But that.
Hold on, because I mean, this too much is going to go by before we can. Wait, what did he just say? He just straight up said Candace is accusing Charlie's wife of having murdered her, and then the answer was yes. And then why? Because she said Turning Point was you just already see the dishonesty there, where it's come on, man. What did she really say? I just had her on my show today. That's not what she's really saying. She's saying look, there are these things that are a little bit shady. We got to look into this. And then she's really saying a bunch of people lied right after Charlie Kirk died. And look, I had her on my show today, and I think that I said this to her. I go, look, Candace is clearly she's investigating a thing while she's grieving a very close friend of hers. And she is, no question, I think she would admit this. She is furious that a bunch of people started lying about Charlie right after he died, and maybe she's drawing conclusions from that don't necessarily need to be drawn. But I understand why she's furious that people started lying. And those lies are demonstrable at this point, dude, if you died or if I died and, just as the way we're friends, and then you knew a bunch of people around me, or I knew a bunch of people around you, just started lying about you, like that would really bother me. And I understand why she's really bothered by that. And so that is just a completely different thing than saying that Erica Kirk was like, did it. I don't know. That's crazy that he would just make that claim. So, yeah, and then I don't know what about the stuff before that. It's all just so stupid. Like what, but anything else you want to say?
Yeah, we'll keep playing a little bit of it, but I mean, you'll notice like once she presses him on it, he says, well, actually it was TPUSA insiders.
Right.
And Erica.
But still, that's like, a crazy thing. But he said it, and then she asked him, and then he said yes. And then when she presses him, he backs off it. This is a crazy claim to make.
Yeah. Well, let's finish this clip.
The point that I'm making is that
what I understand
friendship should not, in our business, I think it's important. Listen,
friendship should not trump. We don't even know each other.
I understand, but even with Tucker, friendship should not trump our manifest requirement to speak out when people do and say things that are both detrimental to conservatism and morally wrong.
Okay, so I don't totally disagree, but I think the way of handling that, at least for me, is much different. So I saw things go south between you and Tucker, at least from my vantage point, when you disagreed on Israel. That was obvious. And he was, well, let me just make my point. Sure. So he was saying things that were critical of Israel and our policy towards Israel. And then you did one show where you did what I thought you should have done if you disagreed with him, which clearly you did. Just say what you believe and what you think is factual, and like educate your audience on what you think are the real facts and give them the evidence for it. But you named him, and it felt like an attack. And that, to me, was the beginning of the end, where he was like, now it's on, because he felt personally attacked by you, as opposed to just challenging his idea. I think you named him and you kind of diminished him. And, you know, he's an 800-pound gorilla. And if you mess with a gorilla, he's going to fight. And to me, that's where it started to go south. And because I remember that day being like, oh, shit. Well, I don't want to see this.
But here's the thing. I would urge everybody to go back and listen to the show that you're referring to, where I criticized Tucker's ideas, not Tucker as a person. Tucker then responded by claiming that I do not love America. That is a direct quote. That I do not love America because I was spending too much time covering the October 7th attacks, and then proceeded in January to then say that I wanted his children to die in a foreign war. Okay, so those are different.
That's a rhetorical.
No, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. An attack on motivation is a very different thing from an attack on an idea.
His point was that you were sounding like a neocon, and he's upset with anybody who wants us to get too involved in Israel's conflict because he feels it endangers American children. Okay. The idea that, number one, the idea that I want the United States to be directly involved in Israel's conflict is not true. No, I know that, Ben.
I've been urging Israel to get off of American aid for literally as long as I have been active in politics.
But I'm making clear what his point was.
But but my point is that that's not his point. And again, none of this.
So we disagree.
We disagree on the interpretation of what Tucker has been doing for the past 2 years. And it's very difficult for me to believe that Tucker is merely anti-Israel when, for example, today in his newsletter, I mean, I can directly quote it if you'd like. In his newsletter today, he claimed that Zoran Mamdani is not anti-Semitic. This was his newsletter today, this morning. I mean, I'm happy to read the text. It's a little extraordinary because, again, it is kind of shocking stuff. So here's what Tucker Carlson wrote in his newsletter today, or what his newsletter says under his name. He said, "Is the incoming mayor a fan of Israel? Does he want America to fight its wars? Not particularly. But a Jew hater? That's a different conversation. We've never seen anything to suggest he falls into that ugly camp. If we're talking about fighting the left, defending Zoran Mamdani, who literally said that he has no opinion whether Hamas should disarm, who posed alongside the 1993 World Trade Center unindicted co-conspirator, who would not disown globalize the Intifada, who suggested that whenever there is a New York Police Department boot on somebody's neck, it's an IDF lacing the strings, to suggest that that's not anti-Semitic in any way? No way.
Okay, but listen.
Or when
I'm going to give you a defense of Tucker here, and I don't need to defend Tucker because I'm not Tucker. But I'll just say, I think in general, because I know him and I listen to him and I understand generally where he's coming from. He would say his problems are with Israel, and he would say that shot that Mamdani laid against the IDF is a shot against the IDF and Israel, and how he thinks they're pro-war, not against Jews. Okay. And I think
all I can say is when Tucker Carlson finds himself in complete alignment with Zoran Mamdani, it is very difficult for me to believe.
All right, dude. Liam, I'm going to forget all the things I want to say, man. We're going too long, and he said so many crazy things.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so wait, so what did he say? He started out at the beginning by saying the thing that differentiates these things is when you attack someone's ideas versus when you attack someone's motives or something like that, right? Like that was the starting point. Yeah. And then he finishes by saying, that you're an anti-Semite because you wouldn't call another guy an anti-Semite because he wouldn't condemn a slogan that is anti-Semitic or something like that. He posed with an unindicted conspirator. Isn't it crazy that they could just make any term a term? I know that's a legal term, but just all of a sudden everyone says narco terrorist or something like that. Like you're like, yeah, unindicted, meaning like, okay, he hasn't been convicted or charged, with anything, but okay, fine. But so think about Ben Shapiro. Think about who Ben Shapiro has been for his entire career. That the guy, I remember one of the things I loved that Ben Shapiro said, and I never liked him, but one thing I remember of a famous clip of his was when he said, there was something about, what do they call it? Implicit bias or one of the woke terms where they were like, and he goes, well, now you're fighting a ghost of a ghost. You're fighting this implicit bias of my, and then look at him. What is he? While they've been calling us the woke right all this time, what is this? He's anti-Semitic. Why? Because he talked to a guy. Well, why else? Because he wrote a letter supporting a guy. Did he support the guy? No. He just said, of all the things they're accusing him of, they're saying he hates Jews. He's never really said anything that means he hates Jews. So if you say you think someone else hasn't said things that mean they hate Jews, but then you go, but that other person actually has said that he wouldn't condemn a thing that other people have said that I think means they hate Jews. Like, what the? Really? That's your evidence to call someone out for a form of bigotry? What are we talking about? It's amazing because at the beginning of it, when Ben Shapiro just very confidently says, hey, don't take on people's ideas, take on people's ideas, not their motives. Or that's the difference. You almost go, oh yeah, there's old school Ben Shapiro, ready to go, throw some punches, intellectually speaking. And then by the end of it, he's the college kid in the crowd, accusing you of being guilty of some, unforgivable sin of bigotry for the crime of talking to a guy who talked to a guy or defending a guy who said a thing once that was offensive. It's wild to see. I can't believe I can't believe anyone who was once a fan of Ben Shapiro. How would you feel right now watching this?
Yeah, well, I mean, as someone who grew up listening to the guy, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of amazed by it, in some ways, like Jordan, similar to Jordan, where I'm grateful to him for a lot. There's a part of me that is super nostalgic listening to Ben Shapiro, because I remember he would talk about Hayek and he would talk about Austrian economics.
Right, right.
He would talk about Mises, but he could never pronounce his name right. He would always say Mises or something like that, almost like he actually didn't believe it and cared more about foreign policy. But yeah, there's a part of me that is super nostalgic about it. But then you listen to this, and then even with Crowder, with Crowder debating you, and all of the tactics are just these partisan tactics about saying well, look at him, he doesn't like Trump, or he didn't vote for Trump, or something like that. And then you have Ben in this episode that came out on Monday. I don't know if you ended up listening to the whole thing or if you only listened to I
listened to part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole thing is basically him just being here are the worst things that Nick Fuentes has ever said. Yeah. He's a misogynist. He's racist. He hates women. He hates minorities and all of this stuff. And then he goes, oh, and Tucker hosted him. And here's all the most controversial things that Tucker's ever said. And not once does he address the actual merits of the conversation.
Yeah.
He never once gets to the foreign policy. And he's like, I'm the one here defending ideas and what America stands for. And I've urged some people, because I've had a couple people reach out to me and like ask about all of this. And some of them, you know, are concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism on the right and stuff. And they're like, what's Tucker doing? And I'm like, I just urge you to listen to that episode that Ben released, which was called Tucker Sabotages America, which is just a wild title, by the way.
Yeah.
And then listen to your podcast with Tucker side by side. Like, just listen to both and like tell me which people are super authentic and forthcoming with what their intent is and what their goals are. Because Ben, he's just saying, he's just like laying character attack after character attack, and he's not actually addressing the ideas here.
Yeah. Nah, yeah. And I think, you know, and this is something that's very encouraging to me, is that I think that is kind of being demonstrated by the audience, you know?
Yeah.
Like I was, you know, I the reaction to even the when I debated Steven Crowder, or debated when he had me on a show and tried to ambush me about not being a perfect Trump loyalist or something, it's just not, look at the audience response. It's just not what they wanted it to be. And I think it what you're talking about is too obvious for most, like, of even the Ben Shapiro audience. How would so many of them not recognize that, like, hey, this is the exact opposite of what we really got into you for. We got into you because you were like the guy doing the opposite thing. At this point, it is so obvious. Forget even me. I mean, I've been, you know, trying to get Ben Shapiro to debate me for a long time. Ben Shapiro has to debate Nick Fuentes. How could he not? You know, how could he not at this point? That
Especially
would be
especially when his criticism to Tucker is like, oh, he didn't ask enough tough questions. It's like,
yeah,
I guarantee you Nick would answer the phone immediately.
Yeah, like, dude, I promise you Nick would do that show. I mean, I can't speak for Fuentes, but Fuentes would do that. And
yeah.
Can you tell me that Ben Shapiro, Nick Fuentes isn't like the biggest political event of our lifetime? So how do you not do that at this point? It's a very weird thing. You know, I said that, and I probably like spoke in a where I'm not really in a position to say that, when I was debating Seth Dillon on Piers Morgan's show. And I said, oh, you think you're so tough? You go debate Nick Fuentes. He'll do it. And I probably shouldn't have said that because I can't speak for him. I don't know if he actually, probably it doesn't make sense for him to do that debate at this point. But if Ben Shapiro wanted to debate Nick Fuentes, everyone knows that that's the biggest show on the internet right now. So why not? You know, if your whole thing was always, we have to have these conversations, we have to debate, and you're criticizing Tucker for not going at him hard enough, then why not do it? And I think the fact is that we all know Ben Shapiro won't do that. We all know, even you could clip me saying that and go, oh, the challenge was, he won't do it. Same way he won't debate me. You know, he's not going to do that. And the reason is because he's, you know, he doesn't think he can win it. And I think on some level, everybody knows that. And at this point, at least. And so the thing is, okay, he knows he can't win the debate. And why is that? And it's not because Nick Fuentes' most wildest fucking hits that Ben Shapiro can play on it, you know, the thing he could take out of context, or even if it is in context, the worst, you know, sarcastic joke Nick's ever made. It's not because that's right. That's not why Ben Shapiro can't win the debate. It's not because Nick is right to say Hitler has aura or whatever, or to leave it ambiguous or even support shit about the Nazis. That's not why Ben Shapiro can't win the debate. That would be low-hanging fruit for Ben Shapiro to make it more easy for him to win the debate. The reason why he can't win the debate, even though Nick is taking the most unpalatable, you know, positions you could imagine, is because Ben Shapiro's taking an even more fucked up position. He's supporting Israel doing what they're doing right now. And so if you're supporting Israel doing this shit, you can't even win a debate against that. That's the truth, right? So it's This is the problem. We can't even have a conversation where Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro are talking about canceling anyone because they're just like public merchants of death.
Yeah, totally. Didn't Gene Epstein try to set up a debate with you and Ben, and he just
he said he was going to try. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but yeah, I think he offered like good money for it too, but that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did, you sent out a tweet before your Tucker Carlson podcast where you were essentially like saying, like, I'm ready to take on anyone. And I mean, it just seems like Ben has already, I mean, he's like taken on the mantle of being like the Buckleyite figure. It really does seem like that. So it doesn't make any sense to me why, especially after, you know, he goes on Rogan's podcast and he says, yeah, I'm willing to do a debate on Israel, why he wouldn't want to do it. I mean, in this clip with Megyn, he says that he asked Tucker to do it. And I mean, if Tucker's not doing it for some reason, like, I think he really should, because similarly, I don't know how Ben would be able to win that.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal with that is, but I don't think that's right that Tucker's refusing to do it. I mean, who knows? But I don't have any inside info there, but I don't think that's right. But I think the fact that that Ben Shapiro said that, as you mentioned, that this kind of like famous clip, and the reason it's a famous clip is because everyone's been holding him accountable to that and sharing it, and he's never really done it. And it is kind of crazy that you could be anyone. The fact that you could be anyone who's like at the forefront of this world of, you know, internet political shows and kind of be known in some way for being a debater, you know, like in some way that is kind of part of Ben Shapiro's, you know, he's the guy who will go take on your arguments guy. Mm-hmm. And to never debate on the issue that clearly is your number one issue is a little bit strange. Like, then you shouldn't, you know, I remember there being videos made about what a great debater Ben Shapiro was, because they, you know, like whatever the debates that he used to do like 7-8 years ago that just today seem kind of irrelevant. But like, you've never debated on the issue that obviously is the thing. I mean, I was saying this, you know, before I think I was saying this to Candace earlier today, but you know, the famous tweet, or in our world, infamous tweet where Ben Shapiro said that Ron Paul wanted to strangle the Jews. Mm-hmm. You know, he said that about him because he didn't support like the terror wars. He was never even really talking about Israel like that. But anyway, you just see, wouldn't there be a lot of things Ben Shapiro should agree with Ron Paul on? Wouldn't you think, well, okay, he kind of likes him on a lot of issues, right? Aren't you the fiscal conservative constitutionalist too? But no, he hates him. He describes Ron Paul as Nick Fuentes because he doesn't support the wars. Okay, so obviously the wars are your number one priority. So debate that issue then. Debate that with someone. And it doesn't have to be me or Nick Fuentes or whoever, but like, or Tucker or whatever, but like, shouldn't he do one? I don't know. I feel the need to debate people who are, you know, on the topics I'm talking about, who are somewhere on my level or higher of like credibility and credentialized or whatever. You know, it's like Ben Shapiro's never done anyone to have one Israel debate. It's that's crazy that he hasn't done that. Yeah.
You're totally right about the debates of 2016 and 17 just feeling totally irrelevant now. And so like I've had a lot of friends like ask me about like what I think about the government shutdown and all of that. And similarly, I'm just like, you know, Congress is shut down, the government is shut down, and still the Trump administration bombed a boat off of the coast of Venezuela today. And it's just like one of those things where I'm like, you know, like it's clear that all of this stuff, all the cultural stuff, all the SNAP benefits, like that is totally secondary. It doesn't matter at all to the government or the establishment. Like what really matters is foreign policy. And it really does seem the same thing with Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, and Ted Cruz. I don't know if you saw this. Ted Cruz attacked Brett Cooper the other day. And he said, I don't even know who this crazy, whiny girl is or something like that. And it was just like, to me, I'm like, well, that's just an indicator that you don't know what time it is then. I mean, if you like it's just, he's admitting that he's out of touch.
Also, just the fucking optics of like, I don't know much about Brett Cooper, but like the optics of like a fucking old senator who looks like the Penguin from Batman, just going like, hey, I don't know who this like, and then there's like some young girl in overalls who's like, howdy, and she's like, look at her, she's like, what are you even doing, dude? Like this, it's just so bizarre, and this is the thing that I think really is moving the Overton window, or it's just kind of like undeniable right now. Like anyone who could see what Brett Cooper said, it wasn't even shitty. It was like the sweetest thing. Yeah. She's just like, look, it's obvious you care about a different government more than you care about our government. So like, I don't know, maybe you should go be like one of their government employees instead of being one of our government employees. How is anyone going to say that that's like a horrible, fucked up thing to say? I don't know how, but I guess they're trying. And yeah, well, as you know, man, those guys are in trouble. They're really losing this narrative war bad. And there is something interesting about, in the moment where Ted Cruz responds in the crazy world that we live in, where Ted Cruz has to respond to that video, he can say, I don't even know who this is, but it's just kind of, it's like I have a girlfriend you guys have never met. She lives in Canada of 7th grade or something like that. It's like, dude, but at the same time, you're responding because actually you do know who that is. And actually you do have to respond to this. So you can try to play it like you don't, but we're kind of way past that. And that's an amazing thing that's going on here, where like everyone's kind of being brought down to this level. Even senators can't act like they're so far above that. Like, sorry, you're not. That's why you're responding to it.
Yeah, it's like the some comedian. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but Tucker was on with this comedian guy. Same thing. And also for them to attack Brett, I should say this because the Foundation for Economic Education is currently recruiting for their like fellowship, like their Hazlitt fellowship that I went through. Brett is awesome, and she went through that program the year before I did. So she like has a liberty movement background, and like she's great, and I highly recommend that any young person. I saw her give Ron Paul like props on a video once a couple years ago, and so yes, she's cool with me. Yeah, totally, and I highly recommend that any young person interested in these ideas apply, because Dan Sanchez, the fellowship coordinator there, is just awesome. He's written for the Libertarian Institute and antiwar.com. So he's great. But yeah, so like back to this thing about like these legacy guys and just like them not knowing what time it is. Something that I was thinking about today is, there was that CNN interview of Tim Dillon where, and then the Andrew Schultz and New York Times interview, where the CNN interviewer is like asking Tim Dillon, like, is Rogan going to be mad if you do this interview? And it's just like this weird, like funny, like insight into how they think media works. And like, it's kind of projection, and it's just like Tim Dillon's a dude and Joe Rogan is his friend, and they're just having conversations. It's not like that. And it's kind of like, like I don't have kids, but it's kind of what I imagine it's like watching like a kid take in the world and like kind of getting it right, but they're not. And like it's kind of endearing watching this girl try to figure it out and struggle with the media.
Right. Yeah. And,
I think the same exact thing is happening on the right, though, with like, especially these people like Douglas Murray in legacy media who especially got their start in like print, where like they just keep struggling with this idea that like if you host a person, like the CNN interviewer kept asking Tim Dillon, like, why didn't you ask JD Vance tougher questions? Or like same with Andrew Schultz, why didn't you ask him tougher questions? And it's like, the same thing is happening now, but on the right. And they just have no idea what moment it is. They don't understand the dynamics of long form content, and that like nobody buys this guilt by association thing anymore.
Yeah.
And also, so I saw Sean Davis with the Federalist. He quote tweeted me when I was recommending that people read Reclaiming the American Right by Justin Raimondo and Betrayal of the American Right by Murray Rothbard. And he was saying, like, he's really upset at the current moment right now, and the divide in the right now, because no one is coming out and saying what this is about. He's saying, you know, what this is really about is they're attacking JD Vance through Tucker Carlson. And I saw that Tucker addressed that today and also agreed, like, clearly these Ben Shapiro types, Mark Levin types, they hate JD Vance and they do not want him to run for president in 2028. And Tucker was saying, it's like, it's funny because they're also attributing this guilt by association to JD Vance, where they probably don't actually agree on foreign policy. And we're not entirely sure where JD is at on this, but they're going to attack JD simply because he refuses to condemn Tucker and recently refused to condemn Nick Fuentes. So I'm wondering what you make of that, and also just like what you think of the current landscape and what's going to happen with the midterms in 2028.
Well, I it's interesting. So I've heard that what you're saying, that the idea here is that, look, clearly this is a fight over foreign policy. That's what this is all about. And obviously the fight isn't over whether Tucker Carlson actually platformed Nick Fuentes or whether he was too kind to him or anything like that. And obviously the fight isn't over anti-Semitism, because if it was, then they would go, oh, hey, I appreciate you, Tucker, you saying to Nick Fuentes that anti-Semitism is against my religion and against yours too, because that's what Tucker said to him, for those of us who watched it. But they don't want to play that, right? Like, look, there were I've made this point a few times, but there were when Nick was on my show recently, and when he was on Tucker's show and on a bunch of other shows, on Patrick Bet-David's show, when he was on Patrick Bet-David's show, he had a thing where he was talking about how he's not really an identitarian, he's really a Christian. When he was on my show, he condemned racial hatred. When he was on Tucker's show, he kind of agreed with Tucker when he said that, look, yeah, no, we can't say it's all the Jews. And Jews have, I think at one point he even said, even a special like protection under our religious views. Now, all I'm saying, I'm not saying that cancels out all the shit he's ever said before, but why are people like Ben Shapiro not posting clips of that and going, look, here's Nick Fuentes himself admitting that Jews have a right to live and that we should reject racial hatred. Why would, if you were really concerned with anti-Semitism, why wouldn't that be what so jump on that. Let's de-escalate things. What a better world we would live in if every neoconservative had jumped on that and said, hey, Nick Fuentes, here's something we can agree on. Like, why would you not, to like a 26-year-old who's like open the door? Okay, thanks for that. No, they don't want to do that. What do they want to do? They want to go back and play every one of his worst clips ever to go, no. That guy who might be trying to do the right thing here, who knows, but might be trying to do the right thing. No, don't listen to that. Go back to all of it, because that actually suits their narrative better, because then they can try to cancel Tucker and cancel everyone. And why? Because they actually don't want you to come back to just being like, okay, fine. It's not any of that shit. It's just that we don't want to fight these wars that we don't need to be a part of. They don't want that. It's all about the foreign policy battle, Yeah. And so I think they can't admit that, because they know they just lose if they admit that that's what the fight's all about. But to me, that's what the whole thing is. And I think it's very, very obvious.
Yeah, well, and it's a clear iteration of, Brandon Buck. He's one of the the better guys. I know there's like a Mises Cato fight that's been going on for a long time, but Brandon
yes,
Buck,
of course.
the Cato Institute is actually like really awesome. I've interviewed him, and what he talks about all the time is like about the old right and how like throughout history, the neoconservatives have always tried to use this adjacency tactic where they pick the worst person and then paint the entire movement with it. And I have this book right here. I'm actually reading this, America First by H.W. Brands. I just got it. And it's, the author's like a Pulitzer Prize winning author, but like super charitable to the America First committee and the movement during World War II. And like he's talking about Charles Lindbergh and how like charismatic and how like big of a figure the guy was, and how, you know, he just had so much influence in the country, and he was the figurehead of this America First committee. And then he goes to Des Moines, and in this infamous Des Moines speech, he says that the Roosevelt administration, the Jews and the communists are trying to get us into war. And then the New York Times and all of these papers and everyone just like immediately freaks out, cancels him. The owner of the America First Committee, who was the owner of Sears, publicly distanced himself from Charles Lindbergh. And it was just like, it's kind of funny to read like similar things were happening back then. And then like all of the America First Committee was painted as being anti-Semitic as a result of this. And I think the exact same thing is happening now, and they're trying to do that to Tucker Carlson. They're trying to have him have this Charles Lindbergh type moment where they can basically say, well, he's associated with Nick Fuentes, and therefore the entire America First Committee and all of these non-interventionists are anti-Semitic. But the thing is it's just not going to work this time.
Yeah. You know, I don't know why I'm just thinking about this, but if you remember, do you ever see the clip? It was I think it was Ozzy Osbourne's daughter, where she was like on, it's not The View, it was like The Talk. It was the other version of the woman's, you know, clucking hens show. And she said the thing about how she was so against Donald Trump's immigration restriction plans. And she was like, oh, Donald Trump, you think you're going to keep all the Latinos out? Well, who's going to clean your toilet and cook your food and blah, blah. And then all the other panelists were like, whoa. And she's like, oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. You know, like, but like, and I don't know if you saw this, but Batya, you know, the one I debated with Dennis Prager.
Yeah.
She recently had this clip that was going viral where she was like, look, Jews created the entire leftist movement in the United States of America, but she's just saying it from the Jewish perspective. But it's like, if you said that from against the perspective, that'd be so the point I'm just making is that, you know, who you call bigotry on is totally like, you know, it's what your perspective is, you know, like, as we know, like everybody, you know, in the rise of the woke insanity in the last 10 years, you know, everyone on the left had said like the most racist thing at some point, but, you know, even when they thought they were defending it, they were like, blacks need their own separate schools because we're so whatever. But yeah, so they always get to kind of choose who they're going to eliminate by calling you a racist or an anti-Semite or whatever. And as you know, Liam, like the history is that they always call the people who oppose the warfare state and oppose the ruling regime. They always label them as you're outside of the parameter of what the social acceptability is, even though it could easily apply to people who are inside of it, you know? Like when they have like you could imagine, I don't know if you remember the way they tried to use the Ron Paul newsletters to cancel Ron Paul. But like if they had tried with that same effort to get Hillary Clinton canceled for calling black people super predators, like in a speech, and like it wasn't, the Ron Paul newsletters were like other people writing articles in a newsletter with his name on it. Hillary Clinton is like up there with a microphone going, they're super predators here to rape your daughter and kill your husband. You know, like they were, but of course there wasn't the media focus on doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so I'm wondering, just to finish up here, I'm wondering where you think we go from here, because I'm seeing this moment where it seems like the dissident right has an opportunity to unite on foreign policy. And I saw, both at the end of your episode with Tucker Carlson and your episode with Candace Owens today, you were kind of trying to, the way I saw it is you were trying to pitch it to them that look, I'm willing to kind of compromise on these other things and just focus on these big issues like inflation, immigration, and foreign policy. And I am a radical libertarian who believes all these other things, but we can just focus on that. And it kind of it made me think of back in the day, you went on Aaron Mate's show and he made you an offer. He was like, I just have a hypothetical here. Would you be willing to accept a situation where we have a libertarian foreign policy and a progressive domestic policy? And if I remember correctly, your answer was well, I mean, you're not giving up anything in that situation. Because, your foreign policy is the same foreign policy as mine. But with an asterisk, I would be willing to accept it if it was local, if we embrace federalism, if, we left it to the states and had, New York with Mamdani and let them do whatever they want and let them collapse. And then, Florida does whatever they want. Then we could agree on these things. And so I'm wondering, as you're finding yourself more in these circles, especially going to the Turning Point event and seeing all of these kids applaud you and agree with you, whether you think that the direction and the strategy should be to align with these right wingers like Tucker or, both. Obviously, I think if we can make it a big tent thing, we have Glenn Greenwald and Cenk and Anna Kasparian, all of these people seem to be aligned. So I'm just wondering strategically how you see this playing out over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I don't know how this is all going to go over the next few years. And it's such an interesting time to be alive. Everything is so different already. I feel like I'm constantly trying to take in new information and go, all right, what does this mean? Where are we here? But my strategy, with all that stuff is I think that it's not even that I've rejected anything about the pure libertarian theory. It's just that having all of that and now being in the moment we are now, well, what's the obvious move here? And the obvious move is to jump on this wave. There's this big wave of energy against this regime, against all the lies. Obviously, who exactly is included in the thing? It's well, I don't know. We all just talk to each other. That's all that really happens. And so let's keep making it clear that, okay, we are different than the leftists. We are different than the socialists. This is what they believe in. This is what we believe in. But at the same time, if we're talking to them about the warfare state or something like that, it's okay, let's all talk about that. And let's talk about how corrupt the whole thing is. And there's so much to what you were saying about me making the compromise, it's just going recognizing that we are in a moment where so much of what we want is so popular. And we're lucky enough to have people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Glenn Greenwald and all these people who are bringing these issues to the forefront. And so we, I think the position that someone like me or someone like you should have is that, yeah, even though we have all these other libertarian views, let's really get on board with the 5 major things that we all agree with. And then we can keep pushing toward the others, I love that Tucker Carlson is doing a thing to try to go at Lindsey Graham. And at some point, I have to have a phone call with him about what he thinks libertarian economics are exactly. And we will try to work that out.
Yeah, totally. Well, it kind of makes you think it really seems like, especially as, you know, these Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin types, it seems like, you know, they're so overly focused on electoral politics in a way that maybe we aren't, or it's like they consider that primary because they really do have like control over those institutions where, you know, like I think it was Meghan McCain, she tweeted out something. She was like, is it really a prerequisite that every single Republican candidate must not be a Christian Zionist? And then she's like, I care less about what Tucker Carlson thinks about this and more about what people in Iowa think about it. And then like Ben Shapiro is speaking in terms of like, this is our party. We will not let Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes ruin it. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, I don't know, again, like Congress is shut down. They're not doing anything. Like really, what does it mean if we win in the midterms? Like what will actually change? And it seems like what we're talking about is actually just like recognizing this phenomenon that like, oh, the younger generations have already decided that this is where they stand on this issue. So we're talking about the culture. And it really does seem like, you know, like an America First committee or something like that would be beneficial today with like Tucker Carlson at the forefront. Like if they really do end up like taking the Republican Party or whatever, if there could be like a big tent movement behind someone like Thomas Massie or Tucker if he ran. And I know you recently said that your next foray into politics will be to try to get Thomas Massie to run for president. And I don't know if you saw this, but Bloomberg announced today that Miriam Adelson is committing $20 million to run against Thomas Massie to try to primary him next year. So, I mean, he's obviously got a lot of pressure. And I think that, you know, with this broad coalition, with all the names that we've mentioned, like Glenn Greenwald, Cenk, like even the people on the left really can, like we can use this opportunity to get behind him. And I wonder if you think Tucker and like Nick would get behind him as well.
Well, I don't know. You know, I think Tucker would. I don't know about Nick, but, you know, I think that just that in itself, we should really make like maybe the big issue going forward. You know, Donald Trump's on record saying that, you know, Miriam Adelson wouldn't tell him who he likes more, which country she's more loyal to, Israel or the United States. And, you know, her late husband is on record saying his biggest regret in life is that he didn't fight in an IDF uniform. He fought, or he served in a U.S. military uniform. Like, you know, the idea that you're going to say you get to go just like pump this money in against our best congressman for what, the sole crime of not being in lockstep with this foreign nation, that's a fight that we should all like, that's the one that we should say, okay, that's where we fight over that. And shame this administration as publicly as you can, and shame everybody who's a defender of Israel. Like, even if you're a defender of Israel, how the hell do you defend that? Defend the fact that they would just pour millions and millions of dollars in to primary a guy who's clearly popular in his district. Like, almost the only way you could take that seat away from him is to just flood money in to flip what is clearly the will of the voters. Like, that should be our fight, to defend Thomas Massie on this first and foremost, and not just for Thomas Massie, but just for the whole principle of the thing. Like, even if you're like, I mean, imagine that this is what the whole fight is over Israeli influence in the United States of America. Even the people on the pro-Israel side who are trying to say, no, that's not how it is, they should even go, yeah, Miriam, don't pour $20 million into this race. I mean, that's crazy. That's proven all of our opponents right. So if they want to do that, like I think at this point, and this should almost be like the warning to them, like, okay, actually go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that. Pour 20 million in, please. The whole 20 million. And then we will all make that the issue of the next year, that you poured $20 million in. And that's what it took. Let's say you're even successful. Okay, that's what it took. That'll be the first campaign ad for Thomas Massie's presidential campaign. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I haven't got him to commit to running yet, but that would be a good ad.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's always great to talk to you. And You guys have really inspired me and many young people. I can attest, all of these people who have been listening to Nick over the last year have also been listening to you and Tucker. And I think that you're really pushing the needle. And the way I see it is, I don't think that we'd be in the same position without you going on Tucker or without you going on Rogan. So thank you again for having this conversation.
Well, thank you, man. And I think we all do what we can. We all do what we can to move the needle a little bit. And it's one of those things where like it's probably best to never overemphasize how much you're doing by doing your thing, but also never downplay it either, because even every little bit counts. And the thing that I always think about is I hope I can and this is why I love talking to you. I hope I can spark interest in the younger generation and maybe get in the mind of some of the younger guys who are going to really change things in the future. So I appreciate you saying that. And I always love talking to you.
Yeah, well, one more thing. You did say, so like after you debated Steven Crowder, there was a moment on Rumble where it looked like all of the comments were against you for some reason. And we were texting about it. And I was saying, either way, I know that there's some kid like me out there, 16 years old, listening to Steven Crowder, who has heard, a legitimate argument against Obama's foreign policy for the first time. Something other than the Iran deal was bad. And I know that that does push the needle because that's what happened to me. So in some ways, I know you don't want to overstate it, but in some ways it is really surreal in this media moment we're in, where it's like for how big the Giuliani moment was for you at 25, you were 25 when that happened, right? Or around that age?
I was born in 83. It was 2007. So 24. Yeah. Yeah.
So you were my age at that time, but there are people my friends who are you're doing Giuliani moments to them, repeatedly, because the media environment has changed entirely. So do want to give you credit for that. And thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you, brother. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for tuning into the Liam McCollum Show, a podcast by Human Reaction. Check out the Human Reaction weekly podcast hosted by Joe Sheehan, David Rand, and Kyle Mack. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to both of our channels.